Greetings, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Garris, and welcome to the Transporter Room. Today, I'm beyond excited to be joined by an exceptional guest, the one and only John Billingsley. For Star Trek fans, he's best known as the ever-charming Dr. Phlox from Star Trek Enterprise. John's incredible career spans over 3 decades, featuring memorable guest appearances on hit shows like The X-Files, True Blood, and most recently, Matlock. He's also made his mark on the big screen with standout roles in films like 2012 and The Man from Earth. Beyond his acting, John is a passionate advocate for humanitarian causes, dedicating much of his time to the Hollywood Food Coalition. So, without further ado, let's beam him in.
Hello!
How are you doing today, sir?
I am Peachy Keen. Thanks for asking.
Well, thank you for coming on today.
With the caveat that we live in a lunatic world with a cakeistocracy at the helm. But beyond that, on a personal level, I'm doing peachy.
Yeah, we don't want to talk
I like
about
to
what's
use the
going on in
word
this world.
cakeistocracy within the first 5 seconds just so people know what they're getting into. If anybody doesn't want to talk about that kind of stuff, it's like, flee, abort.
I know. It's hard to even look at the news anymore right now. I just I'm like, oh God, what craziness is going on today? And so, yeah.
So there's a meme that was floated that said, "I can either be sane or I could be informed," and I totally, it is like a high wire act to try and stay. I can't go there all the time, but I don't want to not know what's going on. Because that's their plan, is to kind of drive everybody so around the twist that they just say, "Fine, I give up. Do whatever you want. Just leave me alone."
You're so right. Oh my gosh. Well, I like I said, I want to thank you for coming on today. And I just want to I've seen you on lots of other shows, watched the old Shutterpot show and some other channels that I've seen your interviews on. And one thing I learned, I've watched different series, is that you moved around quite a bit when you were young and growing up. And I was just curious though, when did you get the bug for performing?
That was in the 5th grade, and I have told this story before. I moved up from, because you told me off camera that you were trying to think of questions I haven't been asked. Failed on that one. I moved up to suburban Connecticut from the deep south. I had a thick southern drawl. I talk like this, and a lisp, and I was a pariah because I was a freak. I was them, not us. And I was accepting that status as my lot in life. But my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Brown, insisted that I audition for the school play, which was A Christmas Carol, and only because, as you can see from my backdrop, I love to read. I was one of the few kids who actually was not only comfortable reading, but could actually lift the words from the page with some degree of verve. I was cast as Scrooge. So I went from class pariah to class hero. As soon as the play was over, I went right back to being class pariah. A very important lesson: you're only as hot as the show you're in. But that was the moment when I thought, oh, this acting stuff is for me. Now, I will admit that at first it was because of sheer vainglory. I thought, the limelight. But my parents were gracious enough to allow me to matriculate with some teachers locally, people who were veterans of stage and screen, and I fell in love with the craft for its own appeal. So I was off to the races from a fairly young age. My parents were very clear. It's like, you are not going to be a professional child actor. That is not going to happen. So there was no scintilla of opportunity for me to actually pursue it professionally until I got out of college. And they weren't even going to let me. I mean, my thought was at 18, that's it. I'm going to do walkabout. I'll go to acting school. It was like, no, you're going to college. And I was, for a brief period of time, I thought, oh, yeah, well, all right, I'll go to college. I decided, because I'm a weenie, I thought I'd rather be on the company tit for 4 more years. So we bargained. I'm answering 4 questions, and you only asked 1, which is a trick I have. I decided that I would only apply to girls' schools. I applied to girls' schools. They didn't have grades. My parents immediately cottoned on to this. They said, you louse. I said, no. We had a deal. I would apply to college. You didn't tell me that I couldn't apply to the kind of colleges that I'd like, which are basically the non-intellectual chasing girls colleges. I did not factor lesbianism as I went to Bennington, and I thought I had the ratio all dicked out. I thought, okay, here we go. 80-20. It's like, lesbianism, 60-40, maybe even 50-50. Yes, anyway, I wandered far afield from where you started.
That's okay. That's so. I don't think I've heard that little aspect of your college career in any other interviews.
Oh,
You,
I reference it all the time.
I,
There was one woman. She was straight on Friday night when I slept with her, and she was a lesbian on Saturday morning. I was like, it was stunning. It was like, wow, okay, I have
oh
I
my.
have an odd superpower. Robin Gustafson. Hey, Robin, are you listening to this? I've never forgotten your name.
I'm, okay, I got to stop laughing. So,
You didn't tell me that I couldn't go blue. By the way, there was no like John, mind your p's and q's. There are going to be
oh
children
no.
listening, grannies from all over the country. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm
Oh yeah, we
basically.
know.
Yeah, we know. We know.
Um, we know. And so I guess so now we know you. I mean, I know you did it in college and all that stuff. So when did you decide to make the move to Hollywood? Actually.
Well, actually, when I got out of college, I was bound and determined to be a theater actor. I had never considered for a second that I would ever get into film and TV. And I decided, though, that I wasn't going to try New York because I don't sing, I don't dance. It's really, really tough to make a career on the Broadway stage if you don't have those chops. So I thought regional theater. I'll go to Chicago. And I hated the climate in Chicago. I loved the city, but it seemed as if it was summer and then it was winter with nothing in between. I thought, first I was miserably hot, now I'm miserably cold. And then I moved west. I moved to Seattle, Washington, in part because my parents had relocated there. I hadn't seen them for a while. And I fell in love with the Pacific Northwest. It was actually a pretty vibrant theater community. And I stayed there for 13 years. I was an acting teacher. I did regional theater. Eventually, I started a theater company that was devoted to adapting fiction for the stage, initially, actually presenting short fiction verbatim on stage, but it morphed and grew into something grander after I left. But when my first marriage ended to the wonderful Janet Freiberger, Janet, you're not listening either. You and Robin Gustafson, neither one of you were listening. She too was a lesbian. I don't know what it was about. I'm going to talk about lesbianism a lot today. She was bisexual. Turned out that maybe she was a little more lesbian. Anyway, when she said, "That's it, see you later," I thought, all right, time to make the next big life choice. I handed off the reins to the theater company and moved to Los Angeles. This was in mid 1995. And I had done some. There was some film and TV up in Seattle, so I had a little bit of a reel and a little bit of a resume, enough to get an agent. And then it took about 3 years of a lot of shoe leather, door knocking, and before I got lucky, I went to a here's a story I never tell. Here's a story I never tell. A friend of mine had a little dinner party, and I attended the dinner party. And one of the guests at the dinner party turned out to be one of the executive producers, a writer on NYPD Blue. And they all decided that they would read Uncle Vanya, like cold read Uncle Vanya. And I was like, I don't want to fucking read Uncle Vanya. Come on, why not? Can't we just let's play badminton or uh. Apparently, she was so impressed with my reading of Uncle Vanya that she had me in to read for NYPD Blue, and I eventually got my first big part on NYPD Blue, which goes to show you, if somebody says we're going to read Uncle Vanya, you go, I'd love to read Uncle Vanya.
You read it. Period.
You read it. By God, that's right. Yeah, lesson learned.
Oh, that's too funny. Okay, so before we really get to the meat of what we're going to discuss today, which is Star Trek, food coloration, and all that, um, and this is what I was talking about when we started. And so I was wondering about this when the producers of Matlock said they were going to show a picture of your character and his wife. Were you the one that chose the picture of you and Bonnie?
No, they said, hey, this guy, he's grieving his wife's death. Would it help you to have pictures of you and your wife around the apartment? And I said, yeah, it would help me, especially if Bonnie's getting SAG minimum because they're going to show her image. And indeed,
Really?
yeah, so it's a little double dip there. So I sent them all sorts of photos, and many of them did indeed make their appearance. Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked this question. And yeah, yeah, yeah. That was. I mean, very sweet and thoughtful of them to think to ask me about that, and to be, willing to spend an extra chunk of change to accommodate me.
Wow. See, I didn't know that she would get paid for just
Yeah,
literally her
your
picture
your,
being there.
your image. Yeah, there's it basically is worth worth your day rate, uh, sag minimum day rate. So yeah, um, and it does help. I mean, in all seriousness, if you're playing somebody who's grieving and you're surrounded by artifacts and photos of the person whose loss would devastate you, it helps you as an actor to land that quicker.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised when I saw that. I was like, wait a second. I had to zoom in. I was like,
Yeah,
oh, that's that's
you
Bonnie.
you were not alone. You were not alone. Many people said, "Hey,
Hmm.
yeah."
So, what was it like working with Kathy Bates? And was that your first
She's
time?
No, it wasn't. She's wonderful. It was my third time. She directed an episode of 6 Feet Under. At the beginning of every episode of 6 Feet Under, there was a death, and I was the death in that particular episode. A man so boring that his wife cold cocks him with the frying pan and kills him. And she was at that point considering a switch to a directorial career. She was wonderful, wonderful director, just a marvelous, spirited, optimistic, and positive person with deep insights. I loved working with her. And then I worked with her again on a show called Harry's Law, and then yeah, which was another legal eagle show that was on some years back. Although I think most of my work was with Chris McDonald, and then this. So yeah,
I'll
she's
be
great.
honest. I am really I when I saw the pilot episode, I was like, okay, this is actually pretty damn good series.
For a network show, and for everything that a network show sort of asks to have happen. I mean, the only thing with network shows is that they really do have a deep understanding of what, I don't mean to sound pejorative, but a middle American audience is going to want. There are certain beats you have to hit. It is more intricate and more interesting than almost anything else on network television. I still personally, am more inclined to enjoy things on cable where it's completely unpredictable, where it's short form, 8 episodes, 10 episodes, 13 episodes, where you don't know what's going to happen. But that's my taste.
Hmm. So that leads me to something else here, real quick. You were saying 8 and 10 episodes. So how do you feel about like our series, like all the Trek series? And just we're not going to go too far into it, but with them only having and today only having 10 episodes instead of back when you were doing it 26.
Well, there's good things and bad things. From a I have to make a living at this perspective, it sucks. Uh, that's more than having my paycheck. And if an episode is taking 2.5 weeks to film instead of 8 days to film, and I'm getting more or less what I would have made anyway from doing the 8 day, then I'm making less dough. And if you're a series regular, which is really one of the big bones of contention, if they say, okay, you're a series regular on this series, but we only shoot 13 a year, but we have you under contract, so we have some real restrictions on the other things that you can do. We're not going to let you be a series regular on another show. Um, you know, that's a gulp. Um, I'm in a forgive me. I'm in a pretty good position though because I'm old, 64, and I don't, if I never work again, it's fine. I like what I did. I'm happy to work. I enjoy it. I'm good at it. I think at least if I wasn't good at it then, at least I'm pretty good at it now. But it's an ageist industry. There's less work, and I don't make anywhere near what I used to. I don't need it. If you're starting out in this business, this is a very parlous time. It's a very, very difficult industry to prosecute right now for young actors.
Oh,
Um,
I can't even fathom it because I've been to a couple of the different conventions and have talked to like Bonnie, Bonnie Gordon, and Dominic and Connor as well, and listened to Michelle Hurd, she was at a convention, and I had just watched her episode on the Decon Chamber with her and Michael Dorn, and they were discussing, the strike and everything that came out of it. And I'll be honest, not being in the industry, it totally shocked the hell out of me. The things that they were trying to kind of basically take away from the actors.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and I'm not going to demonize anybody. It's the nature of the business is such that if you're trying to figure out how to make a buck from a streamer's point of view, from a Netflix point of view, it makes perfect sense, their model. Um, I don't think they realized that one of the drivers of money in our industry is advertising. And if you don't have ads on all these shows that you are, putting up for people to watch, you are taking the largest income source that we all participate in, and you're kicking it to the curb. That's to me really where the sort of like, and I don't think it was necessarily, it was just, sort of short term thinking. It's like, hey, we'll get more subscribers if they don't have to watch the ads. It's like, yeah, but the people who are making these shows, if they're not selling ads, if you're not selling ads, then there's going to be much less income to make shows or to make them as good as they could be. They are now, of course, the streamers are trying to kind of reverse engineer and say, okay, you pay us more money and you won't have to see ads, but they're going to have to charge a lot more money for, and I just don't see it working.
Yeah, no, we'll see how it goes. But I was amazed to hear her and talking to her at the convention one time, and it was just, ooh, she was on fire, but rightly so. So, so anyway, so the main reason, one of the biggest reasons we wanted to get together today was talk about, Trek Talks 4 and the Hollywood Food Coalition and all of that. And so, I really was just, like for you to honestly just let us know, your involvement, how it all got started, from we start Trek Talks and then go to the HFC.
Yeah. Well, Trek Talks, its fourth iteration, is essentially an 8 hour long, I call it a convention without pants. You don't have to wear pants. It's like going to a convention where you don't have to wear pants. For instance, I don't wear pants. It's 8 hours of entertainment. It starts at 10 in the morning Pacific, goes till 6 in the evening Pacific on YouTube. TrekTalks.com will give you all the information you need to know. And it's essentially what you would get at a convention. Great panels, conversations with anybody you can think of in the Star Trek universe, from soup to nuts. Actors, directors, designers, writers, what have you. We intersperse it with some little surprises. We tell the Hollywood Food Coalition story, and we raise money for the Hollywood Food Coalition. This year, we'll have an hour-long discovery panel headed by Sonequa Martin Green. We have about 10 of the cast members. We'll have a wonderful Lower Decks panel. We've got Ira Bear on with Larry Nemechek and Robert Wolf and Terry Farrell, doing a deep dive into a couple of deep space episodes. We've got some of the writers of the famous Trek character series, biography series, the biography of Picard, the biography of. I could go on and on. We've got, it's 8 hours long, and you come and go. Rod Roddenberry kicks us off. He basically pledges a certain amount, and then we try and match it for the rest of the show. We've made $350,000 over the arc of the last three shows. Our goal is to make at least 100 or so, and it's all for an organization called the Hollywood Food Coalition, which I have been involved with for about 8 or so years, although the organization has been around for almost 40. It is 38, I think. Excuse me, I've had this frog in my throat all day. Essentially, it started as an organization providing emergency street care for people in need, primarily food, but also access to medical care and clothing, shelter to the extent we could help provide it, yada, yada, yada. We have morphed and grown it, and I think my wife and I played an important role in doing this into an organization that has larger ambitions. We are now also rescuing about 2.5 million pounds of food a year, in addition to serving a hot multi-course meal to all comers 7 nights a week. We are rescuing 2.5 million pounds of food a year, which we share with other social service organizations to augment and buttress their meal programs. So, imagine a battered women's shelter does great work, but maybe they're not providing robust meals, or a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program, or a place where street kids go. Our sort of fundamental premise is the quality and consistency of regular meals has an absolutely critical role to play in helping people move up a ladder. And also that relationship that we build with another social service organization and another social service organization and another social service organization is about how we learn to work together to serve a community, and in so doing help to kind of re-knit a tattered social safety net. The big picture for me as a progressive is to look at the nature of the way the federal government, particularly these days, is kind of abandoning its responsibility to care about the quality of the social safety net. This in a country where 40% of the American population, if they had an unexpected $500 bill, the roof collapses, their car breaks down, they wouldn't have the cash to pay it. 1 in 5 American kids is food insecure, wakes up not knowing, not necessarily whether they'll eat, but what they'll eat, when they'll eat, whether it'll be any good or not. It is still poverty and need, a tremendous issue in this country. So for me, the nature of how we as communities figure out how social service organizations come together and work together to lift more boats is integral. And food is such an important, critical daily thread in everybody's life that it provides a great means by which to do that knitting.
Oh, I know. I work in the public education field, and one of our big things is making sure we have breakfast available for our students every day, because that may be the breakfast and lunch at school may be the only meal they get.
Yeah, and there's just another, example of, what's going on that's so barbarous is some, I can't remember from, of the many there are to point a finger at, recently said, in essence, well, these kids get spoiled when they get this free lunch. They just get spoiled. I mean, they should have to work for it. It's like you're talking about a child, you know, and you're also talking about the future of our country. You really want to make it harder for kids to learn, harder for them to concentrate, harder for them to focus. And unfortunately, I think that is really at the heart of a lot of what this horrible set of policies is all about. There are people in our country who want nothing more than a permanent underclass, who are available to work for nothing to feather their nests. And it doesn't matter how many people suffer as long as those nests get feathered. Um,
No, you're right, and it's not a good thing. And I don't know how. And so, like you were saying, you save 2.5 million pounds of food a year.
yeah,
That's stuff that would usually just be thrown away in some way, shape, or form.
yeah. That's the 40% of the food that's produced in our country is chucked, and a lot of it goes into landfills, and it actually puts methane into the air. So there's actually an ecological victory to be had in rescuing food, as well as the most important victory, which is to help people who are hungry eat well.
Well, like I said, working where I'm at, we see that all the time. That's why we've even added in a second chance to where if you come in late, you can get, some food that we still, they put out a second meal, and fruits and vegetables will have a, if you don't like when you get your lunch or whatever, you don't want that apple, you can put it there. And then if someone else wants it, and that's one thing that we've been, since we started doing that, it made me realize, wow, how many, just children are sometimes just hungry and starving because they've never had it.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's one manifestation of poverty. I mean, how many people are still ill housed, ill clad, ill educated, ill doctored? I mean, how many? 56% of Americans read under a sixth grade level. I mean, we accept it. You know, as a country, we are okay with that, and to a certain extent, we even look at people who are. I mean, I, I love to read. It is a passion of my life. But what are the words that get used? Egghead, elitist, smarty pants, whatever. You know, we are an anti-intellectual country that prides itself on not being literate level, you know, and that's the ultimate cut off your nose despite your face behavior.
Oh, exactly. Well, and I'm just curious about something else that I know you've talked about in the
Is it
past.
lesbianism? Do you want us to what we want to go back to lesbianism? I realized I suddenly got very serious, and probably everybody who's listening is going, "Are you ever going to talk about Star Trek? Could
Yes.
you at least go back to lesbianism? That was
We're almost at the Star Trek point because if I
okay.
don't talk about it, I'm gonna
I'm
get a.
I'm ready to talk about famous Star Trek lesbians. By God,
Oh my goodness. The one thing I do want to ask about is just, your work with Pancan and Frakes and all, and Armin and all of them, and Kitty.
yeah. So my mother passed away from pancreatic cancer at the age of 70, and from diagnosis to death, it was 3 months. She had back pains and stomach aches. Pancreatic cancer is a fast moving. By the time she got to the doctor, it was too late. And this wonderful organization, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, does many things. They help fund important research. But one of the things they do that I'm particularly smitten with is they raise awareness so that people don't look away from early symptoms, so that they get to the doctors faster. And they also help educate doctors so that doctors don't immediately say, "You're dead," because there now is a lot more possibility than existed back when. My mother, when she passed away in 1990, there was a 4% survival rate. Now there's almost a 15% survival rate. One of the things that Pam, who is the head of Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, said the other day when we were meeting with her that I thought was great. She said it's really important that if you have pancreatic cancer, if you're diagnosed, you get a PanCan representative sitting at the table with you as you move forward. And that's one of the things they do is they provide people to work with people who have been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer to make sure that they're getting that second opinion, that they're actually processing the information, that they really have access to all of the various possible treatments that exist. They do wonderful work. And they're, as is the case for so many wonderful organizations, they're threatened right now. I mean, one of the cuts that is being, which is just absurd, one of the threats that's being proffered is the possibility of cancer research being the funding diminishing. So yeah, I know. It's just it boggles the mind. U.S. aid. It's like we don't want to be on the front lines in countries around the world stopping diseases before they have a chance to cross the oceans to us. That seems like let's kill all the guard dogs because that's a waste of money, and let's get rid of the locks on the gates because that's a waste of money. You know, protecting ourselves and protecting the world should be sort of. Are we
A
suicidal?
no-brainer.
Yeah, it's nihilistic and suicidal. Even I just think he's demented. But anyway, I digress. Lesbianism. Who are the key um, Pancan? Last thing. So every year there is a what we call PurpleStride. It's a walk. It takes place in 50 or so cities all over the country to raise awareness and to celebrate the victories that the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network is winning. This year, our team, which is Trek Against Pancreatic Cancer, includes Kitty Swink, who is a 21-year survivor, her husband, Arvin Shimmerman. You've probably heard of him. Um, and Jonathan Frakes, whose
Never heard
brother.
of him.
Yeah, I've never heard of him either, but he keeps coming to the meetings, so we thought, fine, fine, fine. Juan Carlos Cotto, Manny Cotto's, who was a producer on Enterprise, who passed away. His brother, Juan Carlos, a showrunner and a star in his own right. So last year we made more money than any other team. We made $250,000. You can sponsor us. Go to Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. Look for our team, Track Against Pancreatic Cancer, and sponsor me, would you? Because you can sponsor any one of us. You can sponsor the whole team, but sponsor me because I
Sponsor
want
John.
sponsor John. Um, and I will stride for you on April 26th. And if you're in Los Angeles and you want to come stride with me, it takes place at the Santa Monica Pier.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Far too
I'll
early in
find
the morning. I'm more of an afternoon strider. This is a morning stride. But nobody's perfect.
No, I know nobody's perfect. So, well,
Yep.
I appreciate you giving me that information on on Pancan because I know it's a it is a big thing in in our niche of Star Trek. I
Yeah.
mean, it's got
Yeah.
like you said, it's got Armin, Kitty, and Drakes,
Yeah,
and you.
it's the second, I think, I think it's the second fastest growing cancer. I mean, the good news is that we are, the survival rate is increasing. The bad news is just, in part, it's because more people are actually getting diagnosed early. So more people are now getting diagnosed properly. So a lot of people would die. It would be like, I was liver cancer, or whatever.
All
Anyway,
right, so now let's get into some of the fun stuff. At least fun for me. Your character's Phlox.
yes, he was not a lesbian. He was very heterosexual.
Yes,
He
he was. He only
couldn't
had
swim.
3 wives.
Three wives. Each of the wives had three husbands. So I definitely tried to, with a raised eyebrow, suggest that Dr. Phlox got it on with both the husbands and the wives. Consequently, I have a small but passionate niche of fans who are themselves bisexual and polyamorous, who think I'm a bit of a Star Trek hero. Which, in fact, I'll show you my fan. Which wait a second, I've Wilson Cruz. Um, Wilson Cruz was on a cruise ship with me, and he was being referred to by various people as a gay icon. And I said, "Hey, Dr. Phlox, as far as I'm concerned, was Star Trek's biggest gay icon because he got it on with anything that moved, and he did it with joy and precision." So
Yes, he did.
they made me this.
That's so fun.
It's
Oh
my
my god.
favorite Star Trek artifact.
So I was curious about something as I was thinking about, again, I know we'll ask a million questions at the same time and everything, but before I go to those,
I
the
just make up
standard,
different answers, so it's okay.
you
I
never
mean,
know. But I was curious though, who had the earlier call time for regeneration? You or Bonnie? That was when she
uh,
was a Borg.
I don't know who had the. Well, we didn't work. We never had a scene together, so we didn't work on the same days. So I couldn't tell you that. I will say that because they'd been doing me for a while, so they kind of had it down. It took about 2.5 hours, but they hadn't done a Borg in a while, so they'd kind of forgot. They kind of forgotten. So Bonnie was like, almost through the process. I hate to throw Susie Diaz, who was doing that makeup, under the bus, but I have no choice. Susie, I'm throwing you under the bus. Uh, uh, Susie was almost through the process, and Michael Westmore came in and said, "Not quite. Do it again." So Bonnie went through a 3-hour Borg makeup, then got like, and then went through it again. Uh, yeah, yeah, she was getting paid anyway. You know, what basically all we do is we sit in the chair. It's the guys who have to put this on, and their back must hurt, and they go, "Come in." I wouldn't do that in a million years. God bless them. All I have to do is sit and read the New York Times or chinwag with somebody next to me or doze off or run my lines. I never understood the people who bitched and moaned about, oh, I was in the chair for. It's like, you're in a chair. I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
how bad could it be?
I mean, I've heard more stories that, especially the ones that had those really, really early call times, they would just get in the chair and then they just go back to sleep while they're getting worked on.
Yeah, there were many times I was the first one on the lot and first one in the, you know, first actor. And I'd be in the chair and you'd hear the birds chirping and Brad would be working, but he was great. He'd let me turn the classical music on. I had the New York Times, so I'd, read the Times and just adjust my face. And it was not the worst thing in the world. Uh, you know, I could always, when Anthony Montgomery, I used to call Anthony the human car alarm because you could always tell when Anthony was coming onto the lot. He's got a big personality. Hey, Charlie. Hey, Sam. How you doing? It's like, who are you screaming at? There's nobody on the lot right now. Jesus. And I thought, there goes the pleasant interlude.
When
Work.
Anthony showed up.
Anthony shows up. Jeff Lewis, who was the guy who was making up whoever was in the chair next to me, would show up. He'd intentionally bait me by saying lunatic right wing things that I to get a rise out of me. It's like for a little while I was just reading the Times and listening to pretty music. And I didn't have, I was not hyperallergenic, so my skin was never an issue. The eyeballs were a pain in the ass because they were big. They cover your entire eye, which means that you really, you can't read. And that's the thing I like to do. If you can't read and there's nothing else to do, what are you gonna do? You're gonna hang out by the craft service table and eat bonbons all day. So
Hmm. Well,
I'm
something I know, and something I never knew until listening to Connor and Dom talk about, you know, that that series was word perfect. I
all Star Trek.
Well, correct. All of
they
Star
were
Trek.
anal to the nth degree. Most television is. I mean, in fairness, once you start giving actors too much latitude, like veer off the script, you can get in. Suddenly the scene is going to hell. People are making crap up. There's a reason why you stick to a script. There are shows that can give you a little more wiggle room, and there are shows where it's like the director understands that the producers aren't going to care if you slightly change the word order as long as you got the information and the beat and the emotional integrity of the moment. That's more important. On our show, it was you had to have the language just so. It's also because there's a lot of gobbledygook. I mean, you have
Yeah, the technobabble.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, but I just still couldn't believe if you said "and" instead of "and," they would stop. Did you
Uh,
mean to say that or that, or
Yeah, that never happened to me. But then I knew more my words a little bit better than some of the other people.
we won't say any of those names, so we'll leave them. We'll leave the innocent. We'll protect the innocent.
That's because I only had to work one day a week, so I had more time on my hands.
Okay, you got to sing the song because I. That's one of my
Oh
questions.
yes, yes, yes. So I used to sing the song mostly at a certain point just to irritate Dominic because I know he had a short temper. But yes, I was number 7 on a call sheet of 7 series regulars. I was the only guy who looked like a potato. Everybody else was pretty. So they didn't need me all that much. So yes, I would come in and say day off, 6 days off, and the checks still come. Character actor in the sun, 6 days off, and the checks still come. I had another verse, but Dominic would usually cut me off at that point. Sometimes if I was leaving, it's like I knew they had like some long day ahead of them, or they had a fight scene, or they were going to be on the bridge, which is always interminable because they have to cover everybody and they're all over the helm. I would really make it a point. It's like I just want to find Dominic before I go, so I can sing him the song before I go off to Hawaii for a week. In the first year, maybe year and a half, they were very, very gracious to me, the producers. I mean, I make a lot of jokes, but they couldn't have been kinder and lovelier to me. And they let me double dip. So if I didn't have a lot to do in an episode, I'd go and find work elsewhere. I did Out of Time with Denzel Washington during that period. I did Angel. I did Stargate. I think I did a number of things while I was actually getting a check from Star Trek. Now, at a certain point, that I didn't want to push my luck, and I think there was a period of time when I felt like being used maybe a little bit more. That's going to be trickier for me to execute, so I stopped trying.
So, what was it like working with Scott? He
Scott,
just seems like Scott Bakula.
oh, he's a dick. Just a terrible human being. I mean, I just, I would go out of my way to avoid him on the set. Yeah, we all did. I mean, he was, for the most part, they just segregated him so as to not kind of infect the rest of us with his negative vibes. I've always wanted to answer it that way because, of course, he's the nicest fucking guy in the world, and everybody loves him, and he's a class act all the way. But I get tired of saying that. I'm sorry, Scott. It's been like 25 years of singing your praises. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to start lying about it. Uh,
Oh, I can't wait to see the reactions when that one goes. That part comes out before.
oh yeah, before, yeah, I know, I know, I know. The nice thing about getting old is like I get to,
True.
as my father used to say, "F them if they can't take a joke."
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I think he can take a joke and
he can
give
take,
it back.
no, Scott. Oh, he can definitely put it back. Uh, No, I mean that's also the other part that one doesn't realize is that we can so busily sing the praises of people who are arch professionals in our business that we forget sometimes to actually underline how funny they are and how charming they are. Scott was incredibly gracious to everybody. He knew everybody's birthdays. He remembered the names of all the extras and the day players. He went out of his way to give 100% every single moment of the day, but he never was at a loss for a joke, and he was never at a loss for for a playful reaction to what was going on. He could find sometimes, I think, himself kind of going like, "Let's get back to work now," but he did it very graciously. Um,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can only imagine.
no, it's a really nice group. I mean, I, I, for me, the measure is always, can you tease people? If you're a guest star, you don't know anybody. So, you really, if you feel your way in and you kind of you can find out, okay, this person can take a joke and you can tease and play. Sometimes you feel like, because this person cannot take a joke. I, um,
Well, I can see for everything I've heard on different interviews that the cast in general just had a great time working together for for the most part. It was always a fun. It could be a fun set to be on and all that.
well, it's always
So
a fun set for me to be on, but then I only had to be there once a week. So I was always in good mood. It's like,
you're
hi,
getting that check.
everybody. There were times I'd show up, would be like, I guess people didn't have a very good day yesterday, or, oh, this is a tough episode for folks, isn't
Oh yeah. Well, and speaking of episodes,
it?
so I can tell you. Well, I'm gonna let you answer first before I tell you what my favorite Phlox episode is. So I was just curious, what is one of your favorite episodes of Enterprise in general?
Well, there are probably about five or six that I feel like had aspects that I really liked. I thought the whimsy of Night in Sickbay, which is some people's least favorite episode, was for me one of my most enjoyable because I got to play with Scott. I got to spend a lot of time with Scott, and you learned a lot about the Denobulans. I understand from a fan's point of view where that would not be maybe high on their list because they thought it might have been too silly. They didn't think it showed the captain off to great advantage. But for me, that was one of the most enjoyable ones. Probably the one that was the most important in the development of Dr. Phlox was the Doctor's Orders episode. No, Dear Doctor. Yeah. Um, we learned a lot about him. It was the first episode that I had to kind of spend a lot of time on the guy's shoes and do some thinking about him. I loved the relationship with Cutler, the wonderful actress, sadly passed away. Um, yeah, who I'm sure would have been asked to continue on and might have even become a series regular if she'd been interested.
The rumor was that she was supposed to become more of a regular. That was the
I'm sure they would have loved to keep her. She was having a terrific career at the time. She'd just done a really, I think, terrific turn on 6 Feet Under. So she may not have been interested. I think we would have been lucky to have her. That said, Dear Doctor, is also extremely problematic insofar as, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many fans, the ending seems to uh, it permits a reading that I engaged in an act of genocide. And I've had this discussion with a lot of people. I'm capable, and perhaps it's my nature and my temperament, to argue both sides. But on balance, I don't think that the doctor, that was not his finest hour when it came to making an ethical decision.
yeah. I mean, I don't think genocide was the right thing. I don't think that's the right. I don't think no. I don't think you did that. I feel like that's still one of my favorite episodes in the series because it allows the character, Archer and even you to, hash it out and realize that we weren't there to play God. And to Paul pointed that out that, they'd been on Earth for 100 years and they were still there, you know. And that's the whole prime directive, which didn't exist yet.
It is always the fundamental, the aspect of Star Trek, like your presence changes things. So you can't just kind of arbitrarily draw a line and say this is a step beyond and that's permissible. As a doctor, you have a cure, and to not give a cure when you know it will not just save a life, but save a species from going extinct, because the anthropologist in you thinks that somehow that species is lording it over another humanoid species. I think an ethical decision that was not pro. But having said that, that was a favorite episode of mine for other reasons. I like the episode where I put everybody in suspended animation.
Oh, that was funny.
In part because I got to walk around naked, which was Chris Black, who was a writer on the show for a couple of years. I was teasing at the party one time. I said, "How come everybody's running around in their blue undie pants except me?" He said, "Well, maybe Doctor doesn't wear undie pants." And I said, "Oh yeah, bring it on." And he said, "Maybe I will." And I said, "I dare you."
And he
So
did.
season 3, it's like, well, here we go.
Here you go. Show up or put up or shut up.
And I suggested, which was one of the many things that they said no, they never. I wasn't like Bob Picardo. It's like, what if I sing opera? What if I have an affair with 7 of 9? Sure, Bob, anything you want, Bob. Me, it's like, no, 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 no. I suggested I walk into sick bay. I'm walking in naked. I turn sharply to the left, and all the way across the room, a flower pot hits the ground. It's like my tongue goes down to the floor, guys. I'm sorry, but it's too Benny Hill. It's like, we need more Benny Hill. More Benny Hill.
We could have used a lot more Benny Hill. Oh, that's funny. Well, and I still remember I still remember the pilot, Your Smile, which I know they did once because it cost $10,000.
They did twice.
But
They did it twice. They did the final episode, and that was at Scott Bakula's insistence.
Okay.
And they did the pufferfish.
I remember the pufferfish.
Now, the one thing I got away with, which is another episode that had moments that I liked, is when he goes into suspended. He sleeps. He's in hibernation. They wake him up, and they say, Mayweather's having a medical emergency. We need to take you to Mayweather. And I say, Mayweather, where is he? And I didn't tell anybody I was going to do this, and I thought they're never going to let me do this. And I lifted the sheet and looked under it as if that's where he was, and they kept it. And every now and again, somebody says, that moment when it looked as if you were, I know. I thought they're never going to keep this. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell people what I thought it meant. I just did it in the moment. I thought they'll cut it. But they didn't. So I like to think I snuck a gay sex joke by. And very few people have caught it. Some people have.
I don't think I ever caught it either, but now I'm going to have to go rewatch it and see. Oh my God.
Watch that scene.
I'll never be able to watch that scene again.
I don't know if I ever mentioned that to Anthony or not, but finally, years later, a fan, this is back when I did social media. I don't really do social media anymore, but on Twitter, a fan said, "Hey, that moment when you look under the sheets, were we supposed to think?" And it's like, Easter egg.
You found it. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Oh, I can't wait. I'm rewatching Enterprise right now, so I'm definitely going to be on lookout for that scene.
Actually, that's something I don't think I've talked about very much because I always sort of wanted people to discover that on their own. But now it's out. Now it's out.
It's out for everybody to know.
Yep.
Oh my God. Well, I do have one last question. It's one question I ask everybody. And it's, what Star Trek technology do you wish existed today?
Oh, Jesus, is there an anti-dumbass ray that we could use? If we had one, or the anti-dumbass chamber that some beam that would kind of float down over one half of the congressional chamber and anti-dumbass them. If there isn't that, I can't say that. I mean, I suppose you could argue that the transporter would be pretty cool. I wouldn't use it in a billion years myself. I would be terrified of a transporter. I wish we'd done more with the terror that we felt when we went into space. The weapons didn't work, and the transporter we were afraid of. I think we could have leaned more into some of that scary stuff in the first.
Oh yeah.
Season.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I like the first time that Malcolm and them had to go through it, and he's like, "Get up here before," because he's like, he's freaking out.
Yeah, and the first few episodes, I thought, oh, I like the fact that they're going to play this. I think they kind of, to my taste, I feel like we kind of sunk back into um, a, a comfortable space of Star Trek, where Star Trek tends to live. And I sort of felt like I wish we had never gotten, at least in the first two seasons, I wish we had not gotten that comfortable, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I was gonna say that's not what. Obviously, we were having franchise fatigue was going
Yeah.
on.
UPN itself was a problem, and frequently not even shown in certain. We went to a convention in San Antonio early on. Nobody showed up. We found out later on it's because they don't show in San Antonio. It's canceled every Friday to show high school football games. It's like, oh,
And I live in Texas, so I know about that. And I mean even hell even in Scott's hometown, they would preempt the show for baseball. So it was the only show that was not syndicated, and
yeah, no, it was it was a, I mean, frankly, there's so much to have been. If it hadn't been for the fact that every iteration of Star Trek had gone 7 years, we wouldn't have been looking at 4 years as a bummer. Because to get on a TV show and have it go 4 years is pretty rare. I've been on three flops, shows that only aired 13. I've been on a lot of pilots that the show never even got picked up. There ain't no guarantees. 4 seasons, almost 100 episodes is still pretty lucky. But we were all nonetheless when we started thinking seven in the bag. It always goes seven.
yeah, well, and I was surprised to learn and hearing all the different people is that I y'all have to sign a contract that day or the day you get your.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You don't get into, I mean, you audition, and then if they like you, they'll usually have you back for another audition. And then if they like you after that, then it's up to the network in the studio to approve. And they're a network. Sometimes it was only one audition. It was a network and the studio. For a lot of shows, for every other show that I've ended up getting. Well, that's not true. For a couple, you do the studio and then the network. So it's a scary day. I mean, it's like, you've got two whacks, or they've got two whacks at cutting you, and before you do that first studio audition, you like, yeah, it's like this, multi-page, and you're signing it right out in the lobby. It's like, this should not be. This is like coercive. It's like, I'm like trying to remember my line. Yes, I will act, and you can take blood from me every Thursday and every week, and yeah,
Oh my, well, you know, we got 4 seasons. I wish it would have gone 7 because it was gonna. Anyway, I
yeah.
wish it would have gone 7. I'm just gonna leave it there because that could lead to another
As the guy
discussion.
who
That
wore the rubber head, I was probably the only person who had mixed feelings. Everybody, I think, one, the handwriting was on the wall. I mean, it was kind of amazing we got a third season, and miraculous, and largely because of Scott's intervention, that we got a fourth season. So there was no way God's Green Earth we were getting a fifth season, and I think everybody knew it. It's one of the reasons that Manny Coto was given carte blanche. It's one of the reasons the fourth season was as playful as it was, because there was a point at which it was like, we're not coming back, so let's just have fun. So, to me, when the word came down, it was like, we all saw this coming. I think some of my colleagues were still a little like, what? It was like, well, maybe it's because I'm older. I like to think it's because I'm wiser. It didn't surprise me. And as the guy who didn't have to go through 2.5 hours of prosthetics, I thought, I'll move on to the next thing. It was hard for the crew. I mean, these are people who'd been together through Deep Space, through Voyager, TNG. You know, they marriages and kids and deaths and divorces. I mean, lives spent together. So when we finished Enterprise and we had a big wrap party on the lot, um, it was strange. It was like it was kind of like being at a wake and kind of like being at a celebration, but it was also very much from a bit of an emotional remove, because we'd been there for 4 years and everybody else had been there for 15.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, it's hard. Well, and I know that's like they said they'd all been like you said, and other people have said they've been there since '87. A lot
yeah,
of some of them, you
yeah.
know. or
Yeah.
maybe even 86 when the series,
Yeah.
production. So, well,
Yeah.
John, thank you for giving your time today. I can't believe, I'm not gonna lie, I can't believe I'm getting to sit here and talk to Dr. Phlox and
Is there
one of my.
any additional question you have about lesbianism that you feel like you didn't get answered, that I didn't address? I didn't talk about my favorite Star Trek lesbians at all. At all.
Did you have any favorite Star Trek lesbians?
No. No.
Oh well.
It's a shortcoming as far as I'm concerned in Star Trek. Is they can talk about, gay characters on Star Trek, but it's like, where are the lesbians?
We don't have. Nope. I don't think you know any yet. Hey, not yet. We still
I
have
mean,
Academy. It's
I,
coming out.
I think I know who they were, but that's
We'll just leave it there.
leave it there.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time, sir, and I will talk to you later. You have a good one.
You as well.
Thank you.
For as little as $5 per month, you can gain early access to the full ad-free versions of all interviews, plus additional exclusive content by joining Patreon.